Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. This is M. Gallagher from ALA's Public Programs Office. I'm pleased to introduce today's webinar, Freedom Walk, New Programming to Celebrate Our Freedom to Read. Before we start, I'd like to make a few quick announcements. Today's webinar is a presentation of ALA's Public Program Office with support from ALA's Cultural Communities Fund in cooperation with the American Association of School Librarians. Hopefully, many of you are familiar with Programming Librarian, a website of ALA's Public Programs Office. We have a lot of programming ideas and an online learning library full of free webinars like this one on that website, as well as announcements of grants and annual awards for libraries. A couple of notes about our virtual classroom today. Only the presenter has microphone access. Live captions can be enabled by clicking on Show Captions. We will be disabling the chat during the presentation and reopening it during the Q&A discussion. Please save your questions and comments for the end. If you have any technical issues, please use the Q&A window to communicate with ALA staff. And what brings us all together today is the Sara Jaffarian School Library Program Award for Exemplary Humanities Programming, which is presented annually by the American Library Association's Public Programs Office and is sponsored by the American Library Association's Cultural Communities Fund in cooperation with the American Association of School Libraries. The Jaffarian Award recognizes excellence in humanities programming and libraries that serve children in grades K through 12. This $5,000 award is open to U.S. school libraries, public or private, that serve children in any combination of grades K through 12, provided the library is staffed by a state-certified librarian. The humanities programs can be focused in many subject areas, including but not limited to social studies, civics, poetry, drama, art, music, language arts, foreign language, and culture. Programs should focus on broadening perspectives and helping students understand the wider world and their place in it. School libraries are encouraged to self-nominate, and we hope that this webinar will give you a glimpse into the type of exceptional humanities programs taking place in school libraries that are eligible for this award and inspire you and your colleagues in school libraries to apply when applications open February 3rd, 2025. Applications are reviewed and a winner is selected by a committee of school librarians. The 2023-2024 award committee selected the Tom C. Clark High School Library's Freedom Walk as an exceptional humanities program because of the emphasis on civic dialogue, the student interest beyond the day of the event, the level of collaboration with the community, and the focus on censorship and advocacy. Committee members remarked that the program allowed students to engage authentically with curriculum, with opportunity for critical and open-minded discourse through social justice and intellectual freedom. With that, I'm pleased to introduce today's presenter, Lucy Ibarra Podmore. Lucy Ibarra Podmore has served as a school librarian since 2007 and is an active member of the Texas Library Association and Texas Association of School Librarians. She has twice been selected as Educator of the Year, as well as TCEA's Library Media Specialist of the Year in 2014-2015. In 2024, she received the TLA Jack Straw Standing Tall Award, was named a Library Journal Mover and Shaker, and was awarded the ALA Sara Jaffarian Award. As a Hispanic woman working in a diverse community, ensuring her students are represented in library materials and programs is at the center of her work. Now I'll turn things over to you, Lucy.
Thank you, Em, and thank you so much for the entire team at ALA Special Programs to help me get this information out to as many people as possible. I thank everyone for joining us today to learn a little bit about this program. So next slide, please. There we go. So our Freedom Walk, that's the program that we're going to be talking today. And this was my attempt at rebranding, so to speak, our traditional banned books week. I want to make this very clear that prior to doing Freedom Walk, I was having a very traditional banned books sort of celebration in the library. And so through some experiences that I had in the last 4 years, I decided I wanted to rebrand this. And so this is our Freedom Walk that we had. We just celebrated our second one. And so I'm explaining how it went the first year and some maybe changes that we made the second year, but this is definitely something that we will continue to do. So next slide, please. Today, we are going to be identifying some of the elements of censorship issues that you could use as a foundation for your own freedom walk. There is nothing set in stone to, determine the 5 stations that I did. These were just ones that I felt were very important to my community. You definitely want to see how and discover or investigate how you can customize portions of the Freedom Walk so that it is specific to your community needs. And there are definite ways that you can do that, and we'll discuss that later on in the session. Next slide, please. So before we get started, a little bit about our community. We're a very large high school in San Antonio, Texas. The population of our high school is about 3,000 students. We are a very diverse campus in every imaginable way, socially, racially, socioeconomically. I feel like our campus is a little slice of San Antonio. We extend into some of the wealthiest neighborhoods in our city, and we also include some neighborhoods that house our refugee students, who some of them were in refugee tents a month before they entered into our campus. So we kind of run the gamut of experiences that our students have, and again, the diversity. On our campus, we have 3 one-hour lunch periods. They're 50-minute lunch periods. And I based our Freedom Walk around our lunch periods. And so it was nice to have that amount of time to be able to explain some of the different things about our Freedom Walk. Our school is part of a very large district. We have over 100 campuses and over 100,000 students. So again, the district is as diverse as our campus as well. So we kind of run the gamut in all areas of diversity. And San Antonio, of course, is the 7th largest city in the United States with 1.4 million residents. So next slide, please. So again, like I mentioned briefly earlier, my Freedom Walk was really my attempt at revamping or imaging the traditional Banned Books Week celebration. I know so many of librarians, school librarians, and public librarians as well, we would get this question a lot. Why are you celebrating books that have been banned? And the temperature for the last 4 years has gotten very, very high. And I thought really, my traditional celebrations of this would just be, the standard kind of displaying books that had been banned in other schools or in other districts. And my goal really, I wanted to take the focus off what has been banned, and I really wanted to bring the focus back to what are our freedoms when it comes to accessing material and reading material in our public and our school libraries. And so I really wanted to shift that focus away from spotlighting banned books, but what actually are the freedoms that are allowed for our students. The other really important thing about this was a student voice on this issue. So many times I think we we talk about our young people. Again, I'm a high school librarian, so some of my students are voting age, and I feel like a lot of them get a really bad rap of being disengaged. But really, I think bringing this topic up to them and knowing that they have an opportunity to voice their opinion on this topic through voting that was a kind of a selling point for me to go forward with the Freedom Walk. Also, because I started as a pretty vocal advocate in the Texas Association of School Librarians during the last session. Our Texas legislature meets every other year, and the last time that they were in session was in 23. And that was eye-opening at how much bad and misinformation there was out that our representatives were using to craft bills. And this was, through people just talking about, what they had seen or what they had heard, and not kind of based maybe on a personal experience, but they were using it as a widespread experience. So definitely needed education for our students, but also for our community. They didn't know some of the things that were being discussed. And so we can only make great decisions when we have great information and accurate information in front of us. Also, this was an attempt to build advocacy. This, as a high school librarian, I keep this thought so close to my heart that this is the last time a lot of our students will have everyday easy access to a library, and definitely wanted to, let them know that the library is there to support everyone, and how important it is that we have our library users serving as voices and talking to them about their experiences, accessing information, and how the library has helped them. So these were all of the reasons I started thinking about creating this Freedom Walk. And the idea really sparked when I attended a webinar that featured a college librarian, and she was really just talking about I don't remember what she called it, but she just had tables, how you have on college campuses, like different groups and organizations, just with tables out talking about their resources. And she did something like this, but at each of her tables, there were different programs or resources that the university library offered. And when I was listening to her, those light bulbs immediately started going off. I'm like, this is what I need to do for freedom to read or ban books. So this is how we started. So next slide, please. What I decided to do once I heard that webinar, my kind of brain started thinking, okay, well, what 5 topics do I really want to talk about? And I'm not really sure how I came up with 5. I think I was just listing down some things and some ideas and topics. And these 5 were the ones that I thought would create the most engagement and the most discussion, and that would be most interesting to our students. And so the 5 stations that we decided on were the First Amendment and Supreme Court cases. What are people talking about whenever we're talking about restricting access to information? Where is that in the law? I wanted to talk about censorship terms. A lot of misinformation is happening on censorship terms when we talk about censorship versus restricted versus soft censorship versus banned. And so we definitely wanted to clear that up for my students. Also wanted to talk about the district collection development policy. This was kind of a gamble for me. This is probably the most boring thing I think that a lot of people have never ever considered. But my struggle, I think, or my challenge, not a struggle, my challenge was trying to uh, explain our development policy, our collection development policy, in an engaging way. How will I get students to care about this, about how books actually make it to our shelves? And so that was, I thought I'd put that in there because there was some really important information that definitely was coming up in discussions about restricting access to books. And so definitely wanted to let students know what we actually do to make sure books are on our shelves. The 4th station, we had books as windows and mirrors, and this was really just a reflection point for our students and explaining again the reason why we have the collection that we do have. And our final station, I definitely wanted this station to be there because, again, like I mentioned earlier, our young voters, our 18-year-olds, get a really bad rap of not being engaged. And I think it's because as adults, we always talk about the things that are important to us, and maybe we struggle and we need to do a better job about highlighting the things that are important to students or things that directly impact day-to-day life of a student. And so I really thought that this was an important piece, and I'll explain to you what what the parts of that station was. So next slide, please. The other really important thing that I thought would would add to the success of our Freedom Walk was getting my teachers involved. And so I reached out to my social studies, my history and government teachers, and explained to them what I was trying to do. And they were 100% on board with offering their students extra credit if they attended the Freedom Walk and if they walk through each of the 5 tables. And so I created little bookmarks that you see there on the slide. That was the title of each of the 5 stations. And we asked the students to write 1 or 2 new facts that they learned at each station. And then each station that they visited, they had a little stamp on that. At the end of the Freedom Walk, teachers or the students turned those bookmarks into their teachers so that they had documentation of information that they learned on the Freedom Walk. This was super successful. In the middle of the Freedom Walk, I had to go out and make more of these. I ended up making about 500 or 600 total copies. Like, I really wasn't too sure the first year that we were doing this, how many students would actually come on board for this, but I was so very pleasantly surprised. And if you'll remember, we're a school of almost 3,000 students. So it was nice to see that many engaging with it. So, and even students who did not receive extra credit, they saw the kind of activity around each table and they're like, what's going on? And so it was good just to have a conversation with them as they were stopping by. So next slide, please. The first table was focusing on First Amendment and Supreme Court cases. This one kind of dealt with some things that I have learned, of course, as I studied my librarian degree or my master's of school in library science. And I thought it was pretty well known throughout library cultures, or library groups. But again, through my advocacy here in Texas, I came to realize that not a lot of people were very well versed in a lot of these things. Librarians and of course our library users definitely hadn't heard of some of these things. So this was just a card game. I had a small little magnetic whiteboard that was a tabletop size whiteboard, and I just made little cards with a term on one side or one of the cards and then a definition. And so it was a matching game basically that the students were playing. And so we had the First Amendment and of course the definition of the First Amendment. I'm thrilled to say 95% of the kids got the First Amendment right. So that was good. But we really talked about freedom of speech and forced speech and what is the difference there and what does that mean? And so the next term that we had was the Pico versus Island Trees Supreme Court case. This was super important, and the students were fascinated by this case because this, of course, was the first time that a student sued the school board for removing material from their school libraries simply because they did not agree with the content. And of course, the Supreme Court ruling was that a school board could not remove a book because they disagreed with the content. And so this was really important for me to have this as a basis. And of course, when the kids found out that it was a student who brought up the case, the lawsuit to begin with, that really interested them. And again, it kind of we talked a little bit about how they have a voice, right? And even if they're not voting yet, this young man was not of voting age when he brought that suit. There are still things that you can do. There are still ways to advocate for your beliefs and for what you want to see happen. So that was nice to be able to bring that in. And then the Miller test, of course, this is the 3-prong test for obscenity that came out of the Pico versus Island Trees test. And this one, we talk about the 3 things, the 3 prongs of this test and what that means. Having a book taken as a whole, not just pieces of the book, right? So if there's sexual content in there, it must be pervasive throughout the book. Not just a simple, paragraph here and there or a chapter here and there. One of the other pieces too is that the work must not have any literary lacks serious literary, artistic, or political or scientific value. When I asked the students, I said, tell me which book lacks literary merit. And they were thinking really hard on that. And I said, well, and they finally kind of looked at me and they're like, well, all of them have some kind of merit. I'm like, well, yeah, because you're practicing reading, or you're practicing thinking and critical thinking or whatever, comprehension skills. And so the kids were like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And so I thought, when I was engaging with these students, I really thought how wonderful it was to have this discussion with the kids, because they asked some really great questions, right? And you could see some light bulbs going off with them as these discussions were happening. So that was really wonderful. The last term that we talked about was specific to Texas. So this was, again, in 2023, and this was the HB 900, which passed and became known as the Reader Act. There are really two parts to the Reader Act. One part talks about a collection development policy, right, and trying to have a standard in all Texas school libraries. And there were some really great things, I think, that got added to that part of the bill, with our Texas State Libraries and Archives Commission. They worked really hard to get some good things in there for libraries and for readers. And then the second part of the bill was the part that caused the most controversy, and the part that's still in legal limbo. It's been they haven't been able to enact it yet, because it's been kind of knocked down by several case courts as it's traveled through the courts. And this one was really the vendor law, basically. What this is that vendors, if they want to sell books to any Texas public school library, they must rate every book that they sell as sexually relevant, sexually explicit, or have no rating. And if they rate something and somebody challenges that, saying we think it's sexually explicit, not sexually relevant, and the Texas Education Association agrees that it should be changed to sexually explicit, if that company wants to sell books to any public school library, they must agree with the state of Texas that it is sexually explicit. And so this is the case. Again, this is part of the bill that has been challenged and is still not officially law. So again, having those conversations with the students, many of them who work in a bookstore, they were like, that's really interesting. So we had some really great conversations about this part of the bill. And I thought it was really, this was my table that I was at, and I heard students walking away. One of my students walked away and she's like, this really makes me want to go study law. And I thought that was really great. Something to hear after that. So next slide, please. Our next table was censorship terms. So this one, the first year, was staffed by 2 library students that were working on getting their observation hours and teaching hours. And then the second year, we had some retired librarians who were able to really talk to students about what these censorship terms mean. Of course, challenged means that, somebody brought a concern or raised a concern about a book. The status of the book hasn't changed. It's just been challenged. Banned, of course, means that a book is no longer available where it had once been available. And so we fortunately live right next to a school district that was seeing a lot of books being removed from their school libraries. And so that really kind of gave me the opportunity to talk to them about friends that they knew that attended a neighboring high school in a different district, how different their library looks because of, what had been going on in their school districts. So banned was one of the terms. Restricted, of course, is limiting that book to either permission slips or to a certain area of the library and only available to certain people. What are the differences between censorship and soft censorship, right? So I feel like there's a lot of librarians who are under pressure, I think, to engage in soft censorship, and maybe just not thinking about purchasing a book if they think there might be some controversy with it. And so, even though it might fit everything in their collection development policy, just the fear of being involved in a challenge, that's raised a lot of concerns. And so these terms, I think, were pretty brand new, I think, to a lot of my students. You know, they don't really think about these things. They walk into the library and they expect their books to be there. You know, and so it was a good discussion at this one. I will tell you, one of the discussion, one of the library students who was staffing this table, she said that we had copies of books that had been banned in either a neighboring district or in another district in the state of Texas. And one of the books was an Alan Gratz book. And Alan Gratz, of course, is super popular in our library. And it was a military book. And, you know, we had on the book, you know, this has been banned. And then on the flip side of a card that we had on the book, it was stated the reason why that book had been banned. And one of the students looked at it and he goes, why is that banned? And the reason was that it painted the American military in a bad light. And the student looked at the adult who was manning the table and he said, yeah, I kind of agree with that. I mean, it did, you know, have some kind of tough things about the military. And then she looked at him and she goes, okay, well, do you think nobody should read that because of that? And he just looked at her, he goes, well, no, of course not. And again, it was just really nice to be able to see the students kind of thinking through these things, right? And thinking how, you know, because people disagree on, you know, opinions or points of view being expressed in books doesn't necessarily mean it should be removed for everybody. So really great discussion at this table too. Next slide, please. Our third table. Okay, so here's our collection development policy. I really tried so hard. This is such a dry topic. Fascinating, of course, for librarians, but you know, the students 100% really are not interested in how the books make it on there. They're just like, can you buy this book? And like, okay. And, you know, we don't really discuss that until we have a need for discussion. And so I turned this into a game of shoots and ladders, basically. You know, what is it that, you know, what are the steps that we need to do in our district? And this is a way that you could personalize the Freedom Walk for your community, right? What does your collection development policy look like? It's not just me buying books or me accepting books from companies that they believe would fit my community. It's, you know, me hand selecting the books that go on our shelves and, you know, reading professional reviews and making sure that they fit within our district guidelines, right? So what we can and are not allowed to purchase in our book. And so the other important piece that we highlighted here, I was very fortunate, so fortunate to have our library director work that booth the first year. And then the second year, I had retired librarians from my district who worked at that table. And so they were able to speak very eloquently and very knowledgeably about, you know, the ins and outs of art collection development policy. But I think one of the important parts of it is that, you know, highlighting to them, look, if there's somebody who disagrees with a book in any of our schools, you know, 100 plus schools collections, you know, that's a discussion that we have with that person. And, you know, there are things that we can do to, you know, help that person, you know, find other materials or work with them if they are trying to limit what materials their own child is making, but still having it available to everyone else. So again, this is a really great table to explain a pretty dry topic. But again, my director told me that she had some really wonderful conversations with our students about, you know, how the amount of time it takes to build a list, right? And going through the different reviews and things like that. So another fun table. So next slide, please. This was table 4, and we had this on a giant white board, like magnetic whiteboard. And this was just explaining, of course, the idea of books and mirrors and windows from Dr. Bishop Sims. And we explained we had little posters in there that kind of explained what it meant to be a mirror and what it meant to be a window for a book. And the only thing I asked the students was we had sticky notes there and pens. The only thing I asked them was just write the title of a book that served as either a mirror or a window. And the students on their own wrote long messages about why that book served as a mirror or window. And I was blown away by the thoughtfulness and the reflection that the students used. And of course, most of the books on those sticky notes were books that had been challenged outside of our district. We still had access to them. And, you know, students are shocked whenever they see something that meant so much to them be restricted for other students. And so it was really that was a quiet station, right? There was not a lot of explaining happening at that station. So even on their own, just left on their own, they were writing just a lot of reflection on that. And I really, reading those notes afterwards, I was exhausted. I didn't stop talking for 3 hours, but reading those notes definitely helped affirm my decision to create this Freedom Walk. And I knew after reading those notes that I would be doing this again. So loved this table. I would strongly, strongly recommend that one. The next slide, please, is our last table. Again, so as the students start seeing and hearing something that is directly impacting a library that they have daily access to, a lot of them were like, Ms. Podmore, what can we do? And I said, well, if you can vote, you can vote for people who, believe in your position. And so we had a voter kind of matching game. Sorry, not a voter matching game, a representative matching game. And so we had all of the elected officials who represent our campus. So our school board, 2 of our school board members, we had our state representative, our state senator, the local or the national Texas senator, and the congressman there, and we had their pictures next to what position they held and kind of explained a little bit about what that position did. We also threw in who our state board of education representative is for our campus. And we had at this table, my library assistant was at this table, but we also had our 2 school board members who were there. And, they didn't introduce themselves as school board members, but they were there, and the kids would look at their pictures. They're like, hey, this is you. And when they found out that the school board members were there, a lot of times that was the first time they had spoken to a school board member. And so the school board members really enjoyed having conversations with them. It gave them that face to a title, right? When they hear school board, they don't think who that is. And so the school board members, we're talking, one of them, they're both retired teachers. Both have grandchildren who attend or attended Northside schools, our district schools. And so it was really great just having them, talk about the things that they make decisions on that, again, directly impact our students. And so I really thought this was a fantastic table to have. We also had voter registration cards there. The first year we just had the cards out, and I made the horrible mistake of not counting out how many cards we were giving out. And so I just don't know, but I knew there was a lot that were taken. The second year we actually had a voter deputy registrar there who could assist with questions if students were filling out their voter registration card that day. And then they we're able to take them to our elections department. So that was really nice. Definitely will continue to add our VDR there. The second year, actually, we had a really wonderful group called Youth Do Vote who helped man that table. This is a fantastic local organization that's in our county. They have 3 main missions. One is to register young people to vote, so our 18-year-olds and our college students. The second one is to get them civically engaged by registering them or training them to be election workers, right? And so we had several of our students who worked an election, the spring election, after attending this, and they were posting pictures of, look, I was a poll worker today. We have voting happening on our campus today, and I saw one of our students there, and I thought, I'm so excited that this has worked out. Traditionally, of course, we have our older citizens who are helping work these tables, and so it's nice to see the younger people getting involved, because it's kind of a positive peer pressure, right? Well, they talk to their friends about how much they can get paid and things like that. So this was a great table, and again, this one obviously is an easy one to customize for your community. Okay, next slide, please. So here's some, this is just a video. We're going to play this really quickly. This was a video that I posted after the event, but I think this will show you kind of the setup of what we had with our 5 stations.
What you're doing to me, you better think about what you're trying to do to me, yeah. Think, let your mind go, let yourself be free. Oh, freedom, 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 yeah, freedom.
So you can kind of see in there the energy that was surrounding the day, and you can see the way I decorated for this. That was a very conscious choice to make this very patriotic themed. And again, because we were talking about our rights as readers. And so there was again, this was a 3-hour nonstop talking. I was exhausted by the end of the day. So were the volunteers, but it was one of those like good exhausted days that you have, like, you made some really great points today, and some really, you cause people to think, and that's of course a great day in a library. The next slide, I think, will show you how I advertise. So leading up to the Freedom Walk, on the left-hand side, this was, the left-hand side was really kind of more what I did with the traditional banned books weeks, right? Where you just had books displayed, but we also had some different pieces that we were using in our Freedom Walk. So we'll go ahead and let that one play. So I wanted to mention there, I put in a little graphic for high school voter registration week. Super fortunate, our first year, banned books week and high school voter registration week, they were off by 1 week, right? So I think it was the voter registration week was the week before, and then banned books was the following week, which is when we held our Freedom Walk. And so this year they fell on the exact same week. And so it's so perfect that they are very close to each other, hoping we get the same kind of falling on the same week or close by, because then it just extends the celebrations. So that was really good. The next little video was just a quick little graphic that we did on Instagram to kind of explain briefly what the books is, Windows and Mirrors.
Heart beats fast, colors and promises.
And then the last one, of course, was our Freedom to Week, actually promoting the Freedom Walk, with the date and when they could meet us in the courtyard and that sort of stuff. And I just had fun playing with the different music, promoting these. So we'll show that one real quick. So you can, again, kind of have fun with the different, there's a lot of freedom songs out there that you could use little clips of to just kind of catch their attention when they're scrolling through Instagram. Next slide, please. So we had giveaways again at each table. These were buttons that we either purchased or we made that they could grab as they completed each station. We definitely had bookmarks and stickers to go on water bottles, that sort of thing. And we did have candy, although I'm in Texas and in Central Texas, and it's still blazing hot in September, so all of our chocolate melted. Y'all might not have that problem in different parts of the country, but we moved to hard candy the next year. Still, the starbursts still were a little squishy. So anyway, some little tweaks that need to be made, but certainly the giveaways can be, as elaborate or as simple as you decide. Next slide, please. I think the next slide. Oh, so the Who Represents Me table, that was such a, okay, again, I love that table. And that was really a jumpstart to a new event that we had this year that we called Empowering Voters. And this was again to celebrate High School Voter Registration Week, which landed on the same week as Banned Books Week, or our Freedom Walk. The two young ladies that you see at the bottom left, we refer to them as the Elizabeths. They are both named Elizabeth, Chalmers and Jackson, and they were juniors when our first Freedom Walk happened. And they came to me, they were part of our Gifted and Talented program and a year-long project that they have called Independent Student Mentorship. And they were to study a topic or a career that they were interested in. And Emily Chalmers on the left-hand side, she was fascinated by that final table of our Freedom Walk, the Who Represents Me, and she really wanted to talk to students about media literacy. And she asked if I could help be her mentor for her long-term project, the ISM project for the G2 program. And then Elizabeth Jackson on the right-hand side, she got involved with one of our county commissioners in how we could get young people involved in different civic activities and just volunteering for different things. And so both of these young ladies then decided to host their own kind of little like voter fair, or where they had kind of how do you detect misinformation online, or what are ways that you can be involved civically. And so we grew that into this Empowering Voters table. We had Mark Favreau, author Mark Favreau, whose book Represent talks about the history of voting rights. And that one, the girls interviewed him, the young ladies interviewed him about his book. Fantastic segue into a really wonderful night. Again, that involved the Youth Do Vote organization that I spoke about earlier, about getting students registered to vote and working as election workers. And we also had the League of Women Voters there, who was explaining their vote411.org website and how students can check voter registration, how they can print out sample ballots, that sort of thing. And so we had a little picture station on the right-hand side where students could pose with our first-time voters, or in my voting era pictures, so they could post on their social medias. So that was a really fun event, and hopefully we get to expand that a little bit more next year. So next slide, please. Just supplies, we had just basic magnetic whiteboards. We made a lot of our own little game pieces for the different things. And then again, I had mentioned this briefly earlier, the decorating. I 100% wanted this to be as patriotic as possible, since we were talking about First Amendment rights and our freedoms and rights as readers. And so very heavy on the patriotic red, white, and blue themes everywhere. And then of course we made little signs and had our bookmarks that the students could take away and carry with them, that had information about, you know, how books make it to our shelves, or what kind of books we select in our library. And again, just the different topics that we were talking about. Next slide, please. Okay, so final thoughts. If you are interested in doing your own Freedom Walk, this can be as elaborate or as simple as you want it to be. It could be a static thing. It doesn't have to be something that is managed by different people, different volunteers. This did take a lot of volunteers for me. I needed 2 at each table, so at least 10, and 10 people who were willing to talk for 3 hours. So it was really wonderful that I did have that support from my community. But again, you don't need to do you know, 5 tables. If you want to just focus on 3 topics, totally up to you. I would definitely recommend you take the temperature of your community. We as librarians as a whole, public, academic, school librarians, have been under a lot of heat and a lot of pressure the last 4 years. And I get it if you don't want to kind of poke this bear, but it was a really enlightening experience for me and for the students and for the volunteers who came. We also had a lot of teachers walk by, and they were just real impressed with this as well. When the students handed back the bookmarks to their history teachers, the history teachers would send me messages. They're like, I can't believe the amount of information that the students wrote about their experience. So really, really great. I did pray a lot before I did this. You know, there is a genuine, you know, fear of being targeted, and I get that and I understand it. But I ended up having a lot of very positive comments from parents, from teachers, from my students, and that just encouraged me to continue on for the second year. So definitely gather input from your teachers, administrators, and campus, to figure out, what sorts of things you would like to highlight in your own Freedom Walk. Does any of this work with your curriculum for your history teachers, and how can you incorporate that? Definitely adapt it to fit your community and your budget. You might not have, some of the money to buy all of the supplies or decorations or whatever, but just adapt it to your needs. And if anybody is questioning you, this was the part that I think I prayed a lot about, is people coming after me like, why are you talking about this, and why are you getting political in the library and in the school library? And I always came back to the thought, our goal as librarians is to offer accurate information, right? Not to sway people with information, but just to show them where they can find accurate, correct, authentic information. And so that's really where I came back every time. And so definitely use that and hold that dear to your heart when you're trying to educate your students about their rights as readers. So let's keep those thoughts with you. Next slide, please. Questions. Definitely happy to ask or answer any questions. Hopefully not everybody left.
Thanks, Lucy. That was wonderful. And we have about 10 minutes for questions. So feel free to put those in the Q&A section as you're mulling this over. We do have one question here. Janice says, great presentation. I'm curious about how long it took to plan out the events for the Freedom Walk. How far in advance did you start working on this event?
So yeah, I attended that webinar with that college librarian, that academic librarian. And I wish I could remember who that was, because I would love to send a thank you. That was during the summer, and I just sat with it for a little while, and then thinking, how could I make this work for a Freedom to Read Week? I will tell you that was June of 2023. That was the year that I came. I just been heavily involved in testifying in front of the Texas legislature. And so all of that experience and those, things that I saw and witnessed and heard, that was kind of all in my brain whenever I saw this. And it really immediately came to my mind, but then it was just kind of fine tuning it from there, like where did I see the most need to clarify information? There was a lot of misinformation that I was working with whenever I was testifying in front of our legislature. And so definitely trying to figure out, how do I bring this down to a level that will engage my students, but also so that they could see how these decisions that were being made by elected officials were directly impacting them. And so that was really the I don't know how long it took. I mean, I feel like the idea came pretty quickly, but then it was just, it probably took a month probably to figure out, like, what pieces would work well. And then as far as getting the supplies and things like that together, I mean, I think it came pretty quickly. I have an assistant as well who helped me a lot with the game pieces. Canva, of course, is everybody's friend. And so that worked out really well. So I would plan on maybe a month or so. Maybe 2.
Another question, Tammy asks, if you were to narrow down the 5 tables, which ones would you choose to keep because of how much students participated with them? For instance, if you had like a top 3.
So hard, so hard. I really did like that's hard. I did like the First Amendment rights, right? Because I wanted them grounded in, what are their rights as readers, and I wanted them to be aware of the law that had just passed in Texas, but was also still being, argued in the courts, because this had gained this topic, of course, had gained so much information or so much exposure online, on social media, on the news and newspapers. My student journalists were interviewing me about this topic. I think they definitely needed that information there. I also, I mean, maybe you could combine tables 1 and 2 and have like an all terms discussion, because I think people, adults get confused about what restricted means versus banned versus censorship. A lot of people hadn't heard of soft censorship, where people are afraid to purchase things because of the blowback they might receive, even though that book fits within their collection development guidelines. So maybe we could combine, I'm going to cheat and say you're going to combine tables 1 and 2. Definitely loved the reflection piece for the students, because again, that was a very quiet station. I thought that was going to be the station that had the least amount of interaction, but that whiteboard was absolutely full. So definitely just give them an opportunity to think about a book that they loved. And I left it wide open. Just tell me what book. And shocked and not shocked that so many, 90% of them were books that had been banned in other districts or on other campuses, because those books mean something to the students. And so I think I definitely would keep that one. 100% would keep the Who Represents Me as well. It's hard.
Thanks for giving some options for, how some folks might scale this based on their
Yeah.
capacity.
Yeah.
Way down more questions from the audience, but while we're waiting for folks to submit those, I have a question. I'm curious if this project, Noah, you've done it in the 2023-24 school year and this school year as well. Do you feel like this project affected student awareness or engagement with their school library overall?
Yes, 100%, 100% it did. I have students asking me questions about this all the time. They'll bring up, hey, I heard your testimony in the Texas legislature. So they were kind of aware of what was happening. I wasn't talking about it on campus, except that our students saw a display that we had of books that had been banned. And this is just a really funny story. And they were like, Ms. Podmore, what is going on? What does this mean? And I told them, again, we are kind of on a border between a neighboring district who has really seen a really high rise of books being pulled from their shelves. And I asked them, well, who has friends that attend, these campuses over here? And, the majority of my students raised their hand. This was a senior class, a senior English class that came in, and a lot of them were athletes. And, they all raised their hand, when I mentioned the schools in our neighboring district. And I said, well, their library shelves look very different from us because of, policies that are being implemented in their district. And they were kind of shocked. They were like, that's crazy, Ms. Podmore. We only live, a mile away from them. Like, well, that's why, we need to be aware of, decisions that are being made for you. And so I heard a couple of weeks after that question in the library that the boys were playing basketball, right? And these were club basketball teams. So they were mixing in with the different campuses, different districts and that sort of thing. And there was some trash talking going on. And the trash talking finally resulted in one of my students like shouting out, at least I can read whatever I want in my library. And I thought, like, we have made it, like the library book banning has made it to trash talking on the basketball court. And it made me laugh. So that was so hilarious. I thought it was the funniest thing. So definitely did raise engagement. Again, having the questions, just talking to the students, they're interested in this if we give them opportunity to express their thoughts and ideas about it. And so it's nice to hear them that way.
I love that it's expanded beyond what you would expect the library conversations to be.
Right, definitely.
I think we have time for one more question. So I'd like to ask you, about your experience with applying for the Jaffarian Award.
Oh,
Yeah, what brought you to apply for the award, and yeah, what it has meant to you to be
definitely.
part of this.
My dear friend, Becky Calzada, who is, of course, serving as president of AASL right now, I told her about this event, and she was like, Lucy, that sounds amazing. And this was, when it happened. So in September. And later in February, actually it was closer to the deadline. She says, Lucy, I saw this award, and I think your Freedom Walk might fit into that. And I was like, oh, okay. And I had applied for the Jaffarian Award. So prior to winning this one, the Jaffarian Award was only awarded to K-6 campuses. And I had worked at a middle school campus, and I had submitted one previously. And so that was the first year that it had expanded to high schools. And so it took a lot of work preparing everything, but it was so great because it just fine-tuned a lot of my why. Why did I decide to do this? And it was a really great experience. It was definitely an extensive application, but a really great way to just highlight the great work that's happening on high school campuses. So would definitely encourage people to look at that application, not be overwhelmed. It can be a little bit overwhelming. Take a question a day, but it's definitely worth it. This has brought a lot of exposure to this program itself, the Freedom Walk program. And I cannot tell you how thrilled I am to see that librarians in other cities in Texas and other states in the United States are considering doing this on their own campus. And I would love to see any adaptations of it. I had a couple of my colleagues in the area where I live in that tried this, and some in my district that adapted it. So instead of doing it in the courtyard during lunch, they just had it as kind of stationary stations in their library, and so the students could walk through as they wanted to. And so it's been great seeing other, again, people's adaptations of these ideas. I'm like, oh, that's really how I should have done it in the first place. But the application definitely great. Strongly encourage you to put your great ideas out there, because then it can be shared with so many others.
Thank you so much, Lucy, for your presentation today. And thank you all for attending, making time in your busy day, your election day today, to hear about this wonderful award-winning program. A huge thanks to also my colleague Megan Gieseker behind the scenes for her support with tech for this webinar. The archived recording of this webinar will be available online on Programming Librarian in the next 48 hours, same webpage where you signed up for this event. And just one more reminder that applications for the 2024-2025 award cycle of the Jaffarian Award will open on February 3rd and close May 1st. Thank you all for attending, and have a great day.
Thank you.